Hi friends, welcome to episode number 24 of our procurement and sourcing series. We have come a long way as far as the deep capabilities of procurement and sourcing module is concerned. Make sure that you watch each and every episode in order to get the full benefit of this particular series. In this episode, we will cover in detail about vendor rebate claim process in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. With that note, let's quickly jump into today's topic. Topic we have a lot to cover, but we will go step by step so that you completely understand what is rebate process in Dynamics 365. So first of all, what is the fundamental definition for vendor rebates? Vendor rebates help companies better manage their supplier rebate programs by automating tasks that are required to administer, track, and claim rebates that are earned. So that are earned, you need to specifically understand this statement because supply rebate programs are those which kind of motivates the customers in terms of achieving the predefined targets or pre-identified targets by the vendors, so that once those volume of take or the amount of take achieved by those customers, they are obviously eligible for vendor rebate programs, so that they qualify themselves for certain claims monetary benefits by achieving those targets. This is over and above the item discounts or category discounts offered by the vendors. This is in some scenarios, some organizations, these are referred to as turnover discounts, where vendor is offering an additional discount on achieving some predefined targets. So these are called vendor rebates. But most importantly, when we use this functionality in Dynamics 365, this helps you to flexibly accommodate different types of vendor promotion programs. So probably vendors can run a seasonal promotion program, or if they're coming up with a new product where they want to promote the sales of those goods, in those cases, vendor can run this promotion. And how do we track those promotions? How do we monitor at the item level or at the site level? All those can be done by using this capability, and reduce the administrative burden and errors that are associated with monitoring promotion performance and processing claims. So which is very important. You need to monitor this promotion throughout the year. It's not in a day, but throughout the year, how these promotions are on, what is the state of these promotions, how are we going to process these claims, what is that the customer is actually eligible for, what are the rebate claims. So all these can be tracked using this capability. And it also improves the cash flow forecast, because these promotion which are accrued, in the sense of, let's say you get into an agreement for a vendor rebate from Jan to December, and the purchases are made from Jan, Feb, March until December, and these invoice gets accrued, and we will quickly see how it gets accrued in the system. And at the end of the year, you claim against the total purchase you made against a specific vendor, and have a quantified basis for ongoing and future negotiations, which is very important. If you have any future negotiations with the vendor, hey, you can very well discuss, hey, I have achieved a specific target for this financial year, and the rebate which was offered is 2%, and the next year I am targeting for maybe 120%, so I'm expecting a rebate of 2.5%. So you can have all those kind of negotiations, process the claims, monitor the overall rebate eligibility, accrue it. All this is possible by using this capability called vendor rebates. So for the purpose of this video, I have just created a process flow. So first we will try to understand about the setups which are actually required in order to complete this life cycle of vendor rebate. And then we will understand at a high level about vendor rebate agreement. But I strongly feel a separate episode is required for vendor rebate agreement. So we will cover at a high level in this video. But in the next episode, number 25, we will cover in detail about the vendor rebate agreement. And we will quickly create a purchase order. How do we identify the rebates in the purchase order? And then we will get into processing the purchase order. And once we process the purchase order, against each and every purchase order, once it is invoiced, the rebates gets generated. So, and then we will also see what are the various statuses in the rebate claim once it gets generated. How do we process it? And once we process it, we will also quickly see how the vendor credit memo gets generated in Dynamics 365. And also I will let you know how we can use certain batch jobs so that we can automate these rebate claim accumulation and then processing and approving it. So let me quickly get into Dynamics 365. So first we will start off with the setups. So setups, we have 4 major areas which we need to cover. First, starting off with the rebate groups. So similar to the purchase trade agreement episode where we discussed about the item groups. So here also, if you go to procurement and sourcing module under vendor rebates, you can generate rebate groups under the section where you can create these groups at the item level or at the vendor level. So let's say if you create a rebate group for the item, Currently we don't have any rebate group for the items, so that whenever you create these item groups and assign it to the release products, let's say item rebate group -01, this is the one rebate group which I'm creating, rebate group, and I'll save this. So once you create this item rebate group, you can tag this group across multiple release products, so that for all those items the rebate can be calculated and it can be monitored. So instead of, even if you don't want to track it at the item level, because this rebate group will be handy when you are actually creating the rebate agreement. So let me go to the rebate agreement and show you, because here you can see that once you create a table, it goes for selection of specific item, but instead if you select a group, then in that case you need to select the appropriate vendor rebate group. So by that process, whatever the items tagged to this specific rebate group, for all those items this rebate terms and conditions will apply. So let me revert back to table, and I'll keep the same item which we had before. So let me save this. So this is not validated, probably we will come back to this again. So I'll just quickly validate this. Yeah, this is validated now. So whole idea is you need to create a vendor rebate, the item rebate group, and a vendor rebate group also. Based on the group you can select the vendor, but what you also need to know is where you need to assign this rebate group. If you create a rebate group for the item, then if you go to product information management under release products, under each and every product you can assign this rebate group. If I go to get into the item number, then let me quickly show you. Under purchase first tab, you can assign the vendor rebate item group over here. So system by default checks the item group which is available under the purchase first tab. And similarly you can create for vendors also. For example, this is for item rebate group, another one is the vendor rebate group, where you can assign that particular group for multiple vendors. Vendor rebate group -01, then let vendor rebate group. This is just for the test purpose, I'm just creating a short group. So if you go to procurement and sourcing, vendors, then all vendors, under each and every vendor you will be able to assign this group. So for all those vendors, once you are creating the rebate agreement, you can assign and create appropriate agreements based on the rebate groups. So if I get into the vendor, the miscellaneous details, you can see here there is a option to configure the vendor rebate group. So here the vendor rebate group which we created right now is appearing over here. So you can make sure that the vendor rebate group, whichever the vendors are eligible, you can capture it, those rebate groups in the vendor master. And then once if you create a rebate agreement, system will ask you to select. In case of table, it is going to be a single account selection, but if you select a group, then you will be allowed to select the appropriate vendor rebate groups assigned. So for all the vendors coming under this particular group, the terms and condition mentioned the line will be applicable. So that's the whole idea for having this vendor rebate group and item rebate group. So let me save this. Let me also validate this again. I just made some changes. So this is also validated. Fine. So this is the first setup which we have discussed. The next one is regarding the parameters. So if you go into the procurement and sourcing module and click on setup, so there is an option called procurement and sourcing parameters. So inside the procurement and sourcing parameter, there is a separate section for rebate program. So you need to configure the accrual account and the interim expense account. So first let me explain what is the difference between these two. So like I said in the previous case where we make the purchases throughout the year, so we post the invoices throughout the year. So throughout the year we accrue the rebate for which the customers are eligible, for which we are eligible as a customer. If you're buying materials from the vendor, throughout the year we post the invoice against each and every invoice with the specified terms and conditions, whichever is applicable. We accrue all those rebates, the 2% or 1%, whatever we are eligible for, and we can claim it only at the end of the period, right? But only at the end of the period the vendor is going to evaluate it. So at the end of the period we post it against the interim expense account, and then it gets adjusted with the vendor balance. So this is the account which the system is going to pick when the invoice gets posted, it gets accrued, and this is the interim expense account which gets posted for interim debit. And then once we post the invoice for the vendor, the automatic the transaction entry goes back to the vendor balances. from this expense account. We will see as part of this video, and make sure that you also enable this toggle rebates at invoicing, because the rebates get generated if we enable this toggle. Make sure this toggle is enabled. Another important one is regarding the accrual journal, because this is the most important journal which is used in terms of posting those accruals. So this is you can quickly have a setup. I will just go ahead with the default demo data which is available in the system, but there is nothing great about this. But the thing is, you need to understand, you can click create a voucher series based on which the number series will be generated. Apart from that, there is no major setup which is actually required, but I will strongly recommend you to have the consultation with your finance team and make the appropriate configurations in terms of journal entries, which is very important. So right now we will continue to use the same accrual journal which is already available for rebates. So this is the next important setup. And apart from that, so first we saw about the rebate groups, then the parameters, accrual journal, which we discussed, and then we need to set up the rebate program types also. From the rebate program types, the system actually picks the accrual account and the interim account. So if I go to procurement and sourcing module, then under vendor rebates, there is a section called rebate program types. So you can create multiple rebate program types. So currently we already have a rebate program type called promo in the system, but you can also create a new rebate program type. You can see by default the account gets fetched over here, the default accrual and the interim expense account. This is a interim expense account. This calls for a change of label. So default accrual account and default interim expense account, this comes from the parameter which we saw just before, and you can add your own rebate program IDs. And once we add the rebate program IDs, for example, test rebate, this is for financial year 24, then the I will also capture. Okay, this is because of text limitations, so that is fine. So the rebate program ID need to be captured in our rebate agreements. So these are the first initial setups which need to be done, and then only you can get into the vendor rebate agreement configuration. So let me quickly get into vendor rebate agreement. So these are the initial setups which are required. And once if you get into vendor rebate agreement, once you click on new, first important point is we need to capture the vendor rebate program ID. So once if we capture the rebate program ID, the appropriate rebate program accrual account and expense account comes from your rebate program ID. So this is where I said first you need to configure your parameter, your vendor groups and the item rebate groups, and then your rebate program ID, and then you need to come back to vendor rebate agreements. Vendor rebate agreements is the place where you will actually configure what are all the terms and conditions for the vendor rebate program run by your vendors. Okay, so right now I'm going to delete this line, because in this episode we are not going to create a new vendor rebate agreement. At a high level we will understand the rebate agreement, but in the next episode we will create a rebate agreement. So if you see, this is a vendor rebate agreements, or basically record for contract with the vendor that specifies the negotiated terms and conditions under which the company qualifies for a monetary reward. So here we clearly define the terms and conditions for which particular vendor item, or is a quantity based or amount based. Here also you can provide a minimum quantity and minimum amount, and what is the start date and end date for this rebate program. And then you can also configure what is the accrual account and the expense account, and we will see it in detail in the next episode. First, all you need to know, for the quantity of 10 to 20 we are eligible for a $15 amount per unit, and more than 20 we are actually eligible for $30 per unit. This is the demo data which is already available, right? So let me get back to the slide. So we saw the setups at a high level. We saw what is the vendor rebate agreement is all about. Once we have these two in place, then only we can go ahead and create the purchase orders. So now I'm going to create a purchase order. So we'll go to procurement and sourcing module. Yeah, we are already there. I'll click on purchase orders, all purchase orders. So now when we create the purchase order, another tab also I have the vendor rebate agreement opened. Let me create a purchase order. So when we create the purchase order, we need to give the appropriate vendor accounts. So in this case, it is US-101. Then you can also provide the site and warehouse, whichever is applicable in the vendor rebate agreements. For example, in the dimensions, you can provide, but in this case, I don't see any site and warehouse specified, which means it is applicable for any site and warehouse. So that is fine. Then so let me quickly create a purchase order. So in the purchase order, then as per the vendor rebate agreement, I am eligible for this particular item T0020. So let me go and add that particular item number. Then so the quantity for which we are eligible is more than 10. Let's say if I give 9 quantity, then if I go to purchase order line, and so this is where we will be able to identify the so right now you can see under view, I'm unable to view the price details, but all you have to do is you go to procurement sourcing parameter, then and then under prices section, make sure that you enable the price details option over here, because if this is not enabled, then we will not be able to view the price details. So let me save this. Then let me go back to all purchase orders. Then because that's where we will be able to check the trade agreements, vendor rebates, purchase agreements, all those stuffs. So this is the purchase order 200. Let me open this. This is the item. Let me click on purchase order line. Now you can see we are able to view the price details. So let me click on price details. So inside the price details, we will be able to see the related purchase agreements and vendor rebates. So currently I could not see anything because the condition which we specified is from value of 10 to value is excluded. So which primarily means from 10 to 19, we are eligible for a rebate of $15 amount per unit. So now let me increase the quantity from 9 to 11. So which means I should be eligible for 11 into 15, which is $165. Sorry, I need to click on purchase order line, view purchase price details. So now I can see there is a vendor rebate for $15, and under the vendor rebates I can find that I'm eligible for this particular, against the purchase of this particular line, I'm eligible for a rebate of $165 as expected. That's fantastic. So system primarily evaluates the vendor rebate which matches with this particular item selection, and then appropriately calculates and stores the data in the price detail section, right? So let me go back. Yeah, so this is how you create a purchase order. Under the purchase order, you'll be able to identify it when you navigate to purchase order lines and view price details. And next step is we need to process the product receipts and invoice. So let me go back to the purchase order. So now let me quickly confirm this purchase order. I'm not going to discuss in detail about the confirmation of purchase orders, how to process the product receipts, because we already discussed in detail about the purchase order episode number 1 and 2. Please do check out the same. I will also share the iCode for that in this video. So we will confirm this purchase order, and once the rebate claims are generated, so let me show you. We'll quickly do the product receipt also, because these rebate claims actually gets generated only when we invoice the purchase order. So first we are supposed to complete the product receipt. So let me give the receipt number and then complete the product receipt. So once we complete the product receipt, maybe in the other tab, so ideally the receipts are generated under procurement and sourcing, and once these receipts are completed, obviously we will not have the claims, because in the parameter, if you remember, we have enabled the invoice rebate after invoice. So these rebate claims can be checked under this rebate claim section. Currently you can see there are no rebate claims which got generated, right? So let me go back to the purchase order. Now I will invoice this purchase order. So let me invoice the purchase order. So moment when we complete the invoicing, then the rebates will be available. The rebate claims will be available in the under this page where I navigated from procurement and sourcing module and vendor rebates, rebate claims. So all the rebate claims throughout your financial year will be available over in this page. So let me do a update match status. The match status should be passed. Let me quickly give a invoice number, and then invoice date, today's date, and then let me post. the invoice. So the moment when we post the invoice, at that point in time, the system goes and validate what are all the list of items for which the rebate program is eligible, and then appropriately create a rebate claim for those invoices. So, and though all those rebate claims will be appearing over here. But before that, first the invoice need to be posted. Yeah, great. So now the invoice is posted. I can see the journal entry also. Now let me go back to the other tab where right now we cannot see anything over here, but let me refresh this page. Yeah, right now the rebate claim got generated. So this is how you need to generate the rebate claim. And you can also see the rebate amount for this particular vendor. And even if you get inside the rebate ID, you can also view the purchase order, because this is the purchase order. If I go back, so this is the purchase order which we created for Fabricom Electronics. So that matches. So the next thing is, first we need to understand about the various statuses which are possible under the rebate claims. So let me go back to the dynamic presentation. So we saw how to review the claims, but the most important thing is what are the various status. First status is to be calculated, and you can see here it is basically taken as to be calculated. But in this case, I would say if I go back to rebate agreements, vendor rebates, rebate agreements, this is because the cumulate purchases by was taken as month. That's also the reason why it has taken the state of to be calculated. If it is invoice, probably when the invoice is posted, automatically the value must be in the state of calculated. Right now it is in the to be calculated state, but in the next episode we will see in detail about this. So let me go back to the slide. So the next state is calculated. We need to take to the status of calculated, and once it is calculated, then appropriately the finance manager, the accounting manager reviews it and approve those calculations. And once it is approved, we will process the claim. When it is approved, all those rebate claim entries gets debited from your accrual account. Because like I said in the beginning, first it gets all these rebates go to the specific accrual account, and it is stored there temporarily, and also it gets posted to an interim expense account before it gets credited into your vendor invoice. So first it goes to your accrual account. So for example, in this case, first we need to accumulate the rebate claim. So here we need to provide the vendor ID, and you can also provide a start date and end date. Let me click on OK. And once it is accumulated, you can see the status is changed to calculated. Now only those rebate claims which are calculated can be taken to the status of approved. So now let me select the same rebate ID and I will approve this. So to approve, I'm going to give the same vendor ID. Here also you can provide the vendor group. So in case if you want to approve it for a specific group, so because why this option is like, over a period of time you may have thousands of rebate claims which need to be generated. So in those cases you can use this vendor group option, which is very handy, which is a good option to use in Dynamics 365. So I just want to check the vendor. Yeah, it is US 101. Let me click on OK. So this will approve the rebate claim which we generated. So right now this is in the status of calculated. Now it is changed to approved. And also you can see the rebate was processed successfully, which means, that is another one. You can also see number of vouchers posted to a journal is 1. So now if I go to the rebate transactions, I can view the rebate accrual journal posted for this particular value, which is $165. If we go to the rebate accrual journal, currently you can see vendor invoice is disabled. And if you go to lines, and here we can view the expense account and the offset account which we actually configured. Here you can see this is the expense account. If I go to vendor rebate agreement, see this is the expense account which we configured, and you can also see the offset account. This is the accrual account which we actually configured in the system 130701. So you can appropriately configure those accounts based on discussion with your finance team. So now we have created an accrual journal. Now this has to be debited from this accrual journal. So a debit transaction entry should happen here, and the same should be posted in your vendor account. So that's where the posting of vendor account happens. Then you can view the vendor invoice. So how to do that? In order to do that, we need to process this claim. We have just approved the transaction, saying that, hey, we have accrued this and this need to be processed. Now we will process the claim. And here by using this filter option, Let me go ahead, vendor account, then US 101. Great. Click on OK. So now if I click on OK, the status will move from approved to completed. So that's the final status of the rebate claims. So once if it is completed, then the debit happens from your interim expense account and it gets credited in your vendor balance. So let me click on OK. The status should change from approved to completed. Great. So now it is moved to the status of vendor completed, and you can also see on the top a vendor invoice is generated, which means the credit happened in the vendor balance account. So even if you click on here, yeah, you can see the vendor was processed successfully. That's great. So this is the expected behavior. So let me go to the rebate transactions once again. Now you can see, like I said, a negative debit which happens, and then there is a credit for the vendor invoice account. So here, if I click on the respective vendor invoice transaction, then the vendor invoice journal option is enabled. Otherwise, you can also view only the rebate accrual journals from here. So here also I will show you the lines. If you go to rebate accrual journals and click on lines, you can see the appropriate expense account and the interim accounts which are debited and credited. So let me go back. Then in the vendor rebates, we can view the vendor invoice. So if I click on vendor invoice, and then if I click on print original preview, this will primarily generate the credit memo, so which you can primarily send to your vendor for communication. So that's I think the final part. So this basically generates the vendor credit note. So we have generated the vendor invoice, and you can share this vendor credit memo through online, through email, and then communicate to them about processing these claims so that they can appropriately knock off in their system also. So the processing operation sometimes takes time. That's fine. In the meantime, let me also tell you that the batch jobs which we have, see, for example, in this case, we were updating the various statuses from accumulate to approve and process. Sometimes you can also use the configuration for batch jobs. For example, if I collapse all under vendor rebates, if you click on rebate update, for updating the rebate status, you can use these batch jobs also. For example, accumulate rebates, there is a batch job which is available. You can configure this and you can set the recurrence so that every quarterly do you want to do the accumulation and process those claims, or every off-yearly or annually you want to do that, based on which you can set up these batch jobs, and all these vendor invoices will be accumulated. And similarly, if you want to process all those rebates, then configure this appropriate batch job, and then every quarterly or halfway these vendor rebates which need to be settled will be processed automatically, instead of doing this manually. Maybe in some business cases, the transaction for vendor rebate claims might be lower. So in those cases, maybe finance managers want those to be processed manually. But this is another important idea which I just want to share with you. This is an important functionality, I would say. So let's go back to the screen. Yeah, then this credit note is now loaded. You can see this with the editing of credit note, and you have the vendor invoice, and you have the reference which can be shared with the vendor, and it comes with a negative transaction, so it gets debited from the vendor balance, and it's an account receivable for you. So you can share this credit memo with your vendor. So let's quickly go back to our slide. So that's a whole process of vendor rebate cycle, right from setup, rebate agreements, creation of invoice, purchase order and invoicing. And once we invoice, the rebate claims get generated, and then we process the claims. The transactions move from the accrual account to the interim expense account, and then it gets knocked off in the vendor balance. We also saw how the vendor invoice credit memo gets generated. And of course, you can also use the batch jobs, which can be used in order to automate those processes of status update. So that's kind of bring us to the end of this episode. In the next episode, we'll continue to explore about vendor rebates, but we will discuss in detail about vendor rebate agreement configuration, where we actually configure all those terms and conditions to create a vendor rebate claim. So thanks for watching this video. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel T3 Straight Talks, or follow my profile in LinkedIn to get notified whenever I post videos related to Dynamics 365 F&O, Microsoft, or Microsoft Copilot. I will catch you soon in episode number 25 of our procurement and sourcing series. Sriram Sivashankaran signing off.